What have tourists ruined for you lately?
Like, I feel like there are more foreigners than the locals. Like, locals don't even go there anymore.
And I was like, you? If you're watching this.
Maybe it's time for you to take off your shirt. So, like...
Yeah, so we can get extra views.
Hi, Tokyo Tops.
Hi, Tokyo Bottoms.
Today, we have a special guest with us, Seth. What are we talking about today?
We're complaining about tourists today.
We are complaining about tourists, and this actually came up the other day because we were complaining to each other, I think, about crap that we've experienced. And so we thought, hey, this actually might be a good topic to talk about and generate some conversation. It's actually been being talked about a lot, I think, within the YouTube space at the moment, but we wanted to, of course, as always, add a little bit of a gay spin to it, so.
Yeah, I think it is ironic that like three of us that are foreigners are complaining about tourism in a way, but yeah, we all have like a sample of Japanese friends that are in the gay community, and so we're always hearing a lot of like what they have to say about it.
I think you can take there's some takeaways from this video. That's what I'm hoping. Okay, so the first story I have is actually from the BJ bar.
Okay.
So I been going there lately because it's a good place. You should watch the video. And anyways, they've changed things recently where, just to give you a little bit of a background, they give you oshibori to like clean yourself off after you've played the flute or had your flute played, because they
Like
don't
wipe your face.
and wipe your face or whatever, like wherever. Clean yourself off because they don't have an actual like shower there.
You're right.
So it's a typical thing that you see in places that have the hot towel system. It's that like not machine, but like almost like toaster oven where you pull it down and you take out a hot one.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's what they used to have. But apparently what's been happening is that foreigners have been coming in and they've been taking that and then they go and they flush it down the toilet.
But how can you know that's the foreigners? Like,
Because-
maybe Japanese people can flush it too.
Comment below if you're a Japanese person. Would you flush an oshibori down the toilet? No, you wouldn't. And I think
Do
there's...
people know what oshibori is?
So-
They're watching? Or-
So oshibori is actually, I am gonna, hold on.
What's wrong?
I have an example.
You're gonna have a oshibori?
Well, I have, just wait.
We...
One eternity later.
Okay, so I think we have two oshibori here.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Now this one, here, can you be my guest and open?
Of course.
Open it. This, it would make a little bit more sense if people were flushing it down the toilet. Still, do not flush this down the toilet. But this is more like a wet nap. And I can understand how people might think that this is flushable
Yeah.
because it's closer to toilet paper consistency,
Right.
okay?
It's also not flushable either.
It is not flushable though, but
Yeah.
I would understand that more.
If people does that.
People are flushing this.
Oh my god, yeah.
But I feel like, okay.
People are flushing this. And so essentially what they started doing is they started putting up messages in Korean, Chinese, English, and Japanese on the bathroom
Right.
saying, do not flush these. And then it kept on happening. Essentially what happens is it clogs the toilet and then you have to get a plumber in to fix it, and it costs a lot of money. And it also clogs the toilet for the rest of the night. So this happened enough that they put the signs up and it kept on happening to the extent where they said the only thing we can do now is remove the oshibori. And so now people are going in. And so I was talking to some friends who go there and they're like, what are we supposed to do now? And if you go to the front, they'll give you like a temporary towel. But
Right.
you're supposed to keep it the whole night, which is kind of gross.
And they don't flush the towel.
And they,
The
but
temporary
it's not this towel.
it's a
It's a
giant
towel,
towel.
so it's like very obvious. It's like, how much more obvious can we make it?
But even
And
like
it's
this,
not-
it's a towel. Like, nobody's gonna think it's a paper.
It's happened enough where people are flushing it. And so that is the thing that then, we were talking about it, I was talking about with these friends of like, yeah, it's great that we're having foreigners and people coming and experiencing. I think all of you at home should experience the BJ bar because it's great. But that is sort of the negative side of this, is inevitably you're gonna get people who come and not really know what to do with this and where to put it. And then it ruins the fun for a lot of people because now we don't have this at all. And it's pretty gross then to get your flute played and then just put up your pants and then go home.
Yeah, and then these bars, they also, like, they don't want to serve foreigners anymore when they have these experiences with foreigners coming.
Because it's more expensive, they have to fix the
Right,
toilets
yeah,
and
the
stuff.
clientele, also the Japanese clientele, see that foreigners do this. It creates a bad impression of foreigners in general. Yeah, and of course, as foreigners that have been living here for over 10 years,
Yeah.
you know, we are still seen as probably tourists a lot of the time, so we have to deal with that reputation ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, but isn't it our fault because our video about the BJ bar was one of our most successful
guys'
videos?
Yeah. But I mean, I think that is also something, a good thing to talk about in this thing. Like, I don't want to necessarily, toot our horns, too much to be like, oh, we're, so influential. But inevitably, I can't help but wonder if, some people watched that video and then went and checked out the bar because it's not very obvious, right? Mm-hmm. So there are some factors where we have to like blame ourselves for this. I think our channel has done a lot of great things. It had a lot of positive effects on the community, and I think international people should be more welcome and should have a lot of access to this space, and we can all play together and have fun. But this is the negative side of it, that it is kind of bad.
Yeah, and there are also pluses, of course. You have foreigners coming, and it gives, of course, Japanese people sometimes want to meet foreigners too.
Mm-hmm. That comes back to that conversation. Sometimes we have, there are times where I've wanted to film at a bar and I'll talk to the mama-san. And I've had some mama-san saying, we don't want like tourists in this bar.
Right.
Because the amount of work going in to have this tourist in for that one time is not worth what they get back. I mean, this wasn't every bar. I have to be very clear. This wasn't every bar, but there was this conversation I had once and it kind of made sense. He was like, I would rather have someone coming in every week. I want to focus on the customers who are going to come back, who are going to be here every week and be regulars. I don't need to go and above and beyond, do all the stuff for that one person who's going to come in for 2 hours and I'm never going to see them again. And we have this revolving door of this. He's like, I want to build a space for regulars. And I was half-half, like I was kind of like, that's a little bit like, you're closing off a lot of people and I don't really think that's, ideal.
Yeah.
But I also could understand what he meant. And also this is kind of an example of that too.
It's frustrating to hear that too.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, I think like before we started talking about this the other day, I was also sharing experiences like this. I've had this happen several times where, I'll be with a couple of friends and we'll go to a really, maybe like more domestic bar. People are speaking Japanese and it's one of those like mama-san bars, right? And as soon as, a white face comes in the door, they immediately get a little bit scared and they'll be like, oh, actually, like we don't have any tables. And then if you say like, oh, table ga aru, like, or something, like if you speak to them in Japanese, then they'll maybe loosen up a little bit and let you in. But I think it comes from those bad experiences with other foreigners that come and who have no idea what the system is. And sometimes at these bars you have like a table charge and you have a drink charge, and it's just understood. It's just in the culture. And so if you're a foreigner and you go in there and you are difficult to communicate with and you don't know that system, and then you complain at the end when you're leaving and when the bill comes, it just frustrates them and it frustrates other people. So and then of course everybody kind of pays the price. Because the locals, a lot of them, they do want to meet foreigners, and a lot of foreigners do want to be able to go to these places, but it ruins it for everybody, basically.
Oh, hold on. Okay, I'm gonna be the devil's advocate right here.
Okay.
So it's not our first time doing this type of complaining about situation, right? So we actually had similar, for example, the bar one, we did a why Japanese gay bars rejecting foreigner. People were asking like, but what if the same situation happens in another country? Like regardless, foreigners make a mistake or not, like it's xenophobic if you just reject people. Yes, it's not super beneficial to the business, but rejecting people depend on their nationalities and backgrounds is against the law. So why Japan should be excusable for that?
Well, actually, when I was talking to my friend about the BJ bar, I was, as much as I was like, ugh, like, this is getting like ruining for everyone. The one thing I did think was actually a good approach is that place's approach was not to ban foreigners.
It was solve the problem by not providing oshibori.
Exactly. Okay. And so like that wasn't ideal either, but I did appreciate the fact that they didn't just say, well, foreigners don't understand, so we're just going to reject them entirely. Unfortunately, the solution they took kind of affects everyone kind of negatively. Like if you can't do this right, then no one gets to have fun, sort of thing. But I was appreciative that it wasn't specifically targeting foreigners, the solution.
Yeah, sometimes including foreigners or including people outside of the majority, it requires a little bit of extra work in some cases, right? And I think in Japan, the hurdle that they have to overcome to include foreigners is a little bit higher than we have in the West, where in the West, you have like any form of racism or discrimination based on the way people look. It's far less excusable because you don't really have these like rules that other people aren't really aware of. To be clear, like I really don't like it, and I have like pretty strong feelings about it. Especially, I think after dealing with it for the last 10 years of living here. But I think I can understand it more, and I don't think it's malicious, right? It's not malicious like I see in some countries, like in the US, for example. So.
You know, I don't really complain about over tourism or too many foreigners a lot of time because I feel like I keep a distance from like travelers or whatever. Like I don't really jump into them every single day. But one thing was we were ranking the Tokyo Hatenba ranking for a video, right? Like, have you seen that one? Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Did you take notes?
I did.
so back in the day, I mean, like it was a couple months ago, we ranked Body Breath as the SS tier, or the S tier, like one of the best, right? But I think our feeling on Body Breath changed a lot over the previous months because we just feel like it's not the same vibe anymore. Like I feel like there are more foreigners than the locals. Like locals don't even go there anymore.
Yeah.
The same thing happened for the other day I was with my friend. We went to Dick Dog for the first time because my another friend was saying like Dick Dog's really good vibe and a lot of like hot guys over there. And I went there was like all Chinese people. I was like more imagining like a mixed crowd of like local people and like foreigner having fun together.
Yeah.
But I feel like these days it's just like all foreigners. Like there's no local. So you can't really taste the local at Body Breath anymore.
The thing that I've noticed about Body Breath at the moment also is that it's very much being treated by tourists as some like group tourist spot. So everyone's coming together with a group of friends. And I am aware that you and I both went together to the bathhouse in Hong Kong. So I understand how you might want to go with friends, but I'm talking about like 5 or 6.
Yeah.
They'll go together, they're like chatting all like, and it's okay, it's not necessarily bad to chat, but it's like when you're in a group and I feel like they lose awareness that they're in a group and they're in a space which is usually very solo, and they're walking down very thin halls as a group and talking and like killing the vibe essentially.
Yeah.
And so at Body Breath, there's actually like a sign now to be like, don't talk in the halls, don't be in a big group, keep quiet. Like, and I think that that's trying to keep the vibe, right? But I still think that that's a challenge because I don't know if people are reading that. They're just coming, and of course, they're coming in, they want to have fun. Oh my God, look at this space. Oh my God, let's go down there. I get it, but for us who've like been there a while and like are there for different reasons, it's a bit of a vibe kill. And then on top of that, I told you the story about that. I don't think I told you the story, but I told you the story about that guy being really rude to me, right?
Which one?
The
There's
guy,
so many people rude to
there's
you.
so many people who are rude to me. But this is the difference. When locals are rude to me, it's pretty offensive. But this guy was like a new level.
Oh, I heard the story. Should I
You can try,
recreate the
yeah.
story? So you were looking at a really hot guy, and he was like, "What the fuck are you looking at?"
Yeah, he didn't say fuck, but,
like,
but yeah.
Like, why are you looking at me?
Why are you looking at
like,
me?
in this direction or
Yeah.
something? And you were kind of like, "Oh, because I thought you were really cute," or something like that, right? You were just like trying to be kind, even
Yeah.
though he was already so offensive.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, there are so many other hot guys, and you can look at them.
Yeah.
Like, just don't look at me." So
Exactly.
what was he?
So I don't know. He was a foreigner, Asian guy, and a foreigner. But I'm not gonna guess.
What was he? Filipino? Was he Thai?
He was offensive, that's what he was. And I was just sitting there being like, how dare you? You fucker. If you're watching this, I don't know if he lived here or not. I know that he's not Japanese, but to like come in and be in that space and just to be so offensive to everyone else. That's when I'm like, we don't need tourists like this. Get the fuck out.
Right. A part of being a respectful tourist is like soft rejection. You know, be nice to people. It doesn't matter if they're a local or not.
Yeah.
Just treat people with respect.
Let me add one more point, okay, just to finish my story. So we have ruined so many hatemba and bars for the locals.
Sorry.
I'm gonna ruin one more for you guys. What is good right now is a Wankers Union in Kanda. A lot of how Japanese people still going there. So if you want to taste some Japanese, go to Kanda Wankers Union.
And that'll be good because then it'll take them away from BJ Bar for a little bit, and maybe BJ Bar will go
Will
back
recover.
To normal. Yeah.
Now go ruin Wankers Union. Also maybe Shinagawa Junction because they just don't like.
No, but that's true.
They reject foreigners.
Well, that's actually a really good point, though, right?
Why?
Shinagawa Junction, as much as I was offended by the whole thing. Watch the video about all the rules. The rules were really offensive, but those rules are probably allowing it to maintain a foreigner, whatever, some sort of space. It's essentially
tourists with basic Japanese knowledge cannot enter under any circumstances. Only individuals who appear young and attractive, according to Japanese staff, can enter the store. Wow. For foreigners, only individuals in their 20s are permitted to enter. Foreigners often appear older to Japanese people than their actual age. Wow.
It's not
Yeah,
like it was
and also
very,
if you're fat, like your tummy's probably gonna touch other people when you pass by the alleys. So that's
literally
why.
what it was. Yeah. So it's pretty offensive, right?
Yeah.
But, and I am not justifying what they said, but as a result, they probably have been able to keep their target audience.
Okay.
Whereas other places are probably getting different audiences that perhaps are having some negative
Right.
consequences, but you get money.
Talking about people going as a group.
Yeah.
Because I see a lot of like social media, like Chinese social media, people are asking to assemble a group, being like, oh, it's my actually first time going to a Japanese hatemba, so let's all go together so I don't feel so nervous.
Yeah.
I see that a lot on Red.
Yeah.
You know, like the app you were talking
Yeah.
about. So it's actually a common practice for
Yeah.
people gathering a group and go sightseeing right
Yeah,
now.
exactly. And
It's
it's exciting to also do that with other people, and especially if you're nervous and it's a place you've never been. It's not that I don't get it, right? It's more stopping and thinking about how can we do this in a respectful way.
okay.
So Nichome Gay Town used to be the street vibe there was a lot more community. I think pre-COVID probably. You know, when we went there, we would immediately see 50 people that we know, and so it just became this place that people would go on the weekends because it's kind of like home. You know, that's like where a lot of your gay family is, and I think that the volume of tourists has really changed that because it's like a lot of these street bars, they're overwhelmed the amount of people there. So a lot of the people that you know don't go, or they'll, you know, go somewhere else or something. The crowd is a lot more transient, so there's a churn of people. The type of the people who are there are changing every week. I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing, right? Like, of course, it's great if people come, and I think tourism, you know, of course, it's helping a lot of these gay bars. A lot of them have really upped their game, actually. I think in the last 5 years, we have some really nice bars now. But you have to realize there's a trade-off, basically, right? So some of that community is actually gone now, or it might be kind of migrating into private spaces now, where it used to be this, like, really nice community in Nichome. And it's harder to find now. Yeah.
So you were talking about you want to share some tips on what to do or what don't. Like, do you want to do it right now?
So, yeah, try to know the system if you're going to a smaller bar. I think that people need to understand there might be table charges. Don't be loud. Like, I mean, some of the local people are going to be loud, and it might sound hypocritical to say, you know, don't be loud. But if you're in a mama-san bar and you're you know, in your crowd of foreigners and everybody's speaking English really loud in the corner, that might be a little disrespectful. You're kind of killing the vibe for a lot of the regular clientele, right? So the volume of tourists coming, I don't think that's like a solvable thing, but it can be a better thing if people behave the right way, I think.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Like,
don't throw garbage on the ground and shit, you know.
But
Like,
that's not-
sometimes foreigners aren't doing that, and sometimes it's local people too. But
local people do
try
it.
to not-
Young people do it.
Yeah.
We have to remember too, like it's just like being a minority in any society.
Yes.
We're kind of like held to a higher
Yes.
standard, you
Yes.
know? And it's not always fair.
Yeah,
right?
if young people throw trash on the floor, they're not gonna be on the Japanese news.
Yeah.
Right, but if
And if
foreigners
foreigners do that,
yeah,
and they would
then-
blame the foreigners
Yes.
and being like,
Exactly,
oh, you know, like look at the foreigners not following the rules.
Right.
But
Yeah.
actually, a lot of Japanese people also breaking the rule. But the media always like, you know, pick out the foreigners
Yeah.
and make them
Right.
into big topics.
Yeah, 100% agree. So that's that's a very good way to sort of frame, you know, your mind when you're coming here. And it is unfair, you know, that
Yeah,
the
yeah,
locals
yeah.
get to get away with it or whatever, but inevitably that is the way that, you know, foreigners are seen. And so you do your best to not give a bad image. Don't allow the media to keep pushing this, you know, narrative that it's the foreigners' problem. If we stop throwing garbage, then they have nothing to film.
Right.
So, and if you go to Hatenba, just be quiet.
I'm super loud in Haten, but I'm like, oh,
That's the type of loudness that we want. Because that's the vibe. That's the vibe. You already
the
keep the vibe. Not
Don't be
not when you're in a
laughing
room
and
and you're like
joking around.
touching someone, you
Yeah.
hear someone outside the door like laughing and like pointing at this and saying all that stuff. That's where it's like kind of ruining the vibe.
so next time I should be like,
No, you can
Exactly,
the
yeah.
vibe. Well, that's also part of the vibe too. Actually, that's the vibe too. That's part of the vibe too.